Hey everyone, tonight we travel back. Not just a few decades, but nearly a millennium. You're stepping out of your world with its humming refrigerators and glowing screens, and into the 12th century court of a forgotten dynasty in what is now modern-day Turkey. Imagine a palace where magic seems real, where bronze birds sing on command and silent servants pour your wine without ever being asked. But this isn't magic, it's mechanics. It's a world powered not by electricity and silicon, but by the steady, relentless flow of water and the genius of a man who could dream in gears. It's a beautiful, wondrous place, but let's be honest, you probably wouldn't survive it. Forget Wi-Fi. Think questionable sanitation and medicine that often involved hoping for the best. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. As always, I'd love to see where you're all listening from tonight, so please drop your city or country and the local time in the comments. It's always fascinating to see our little community spread across the globe. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The first thing that hits you is the heat. It's a dry, heavy heat that radiates from the immense black basalt walls of the city and the sun-baked flagstones of the palace courtyard. You are in Amid, the capital of the Artukid Emirs, a place we now call Diyarbakir. The air is thick with the smells of charcoal fires, exotic spices, and the dust of the Anatolian plain. All around you, the architecture is a breathtaking display of Seljuk design. Intricate geometric patterns, called giri, are carved into every archway, and beautiful Kufic script adorns the walls. But it's the sounds that are most unusual. Beneath the distant murmur of the city, there is a constant, gentle, liquid music. The gurgle and splash of water, flowing through hidden channels, powering the impossible things you see around you. In a shaded alcove, a peacock automaton made of polished bronze fans its tail, and a moment later, a stream of water pours from its beak into a basin. On a balcony above, you see what looks like a woman in regal attire, but her movements are just a little too smooth, a little too perfect. She lifts a flask, pours a drink, and offers it, all without a single sign of life in her eyes. It feels like you've stumbled into the workshop of a sorcerer. But there is no sorcery here. This is a world without a single line of computer code, yet it is filled with programmable machines. The power cord is a channel of flowing water. The software is a precisely shaped piece of wood with pegs sticking out of it. This is the world of ingenious mechanical devices, or Hayal, a place where the boundary between art and engineering has completely dissolved. You look at these incredible creations and it's easy to be enchanted, to forget the realities of the 12th century. The water in that beautiful fountain is likely drawn from the same river where the city's sewage is dumped. The life expectancy is maybe 35, if you're lucky. People might protect their skin from this harsh sun with a mixture of rice bran and, yes, crocodile dung. So while you admire the mechanical marvels, it's best not to drink the water. Historians still argue whether these incredible machines were primarily scientific curiosities, symbols of political power, or simply the world's most elaborate and expensive courtly entertainment. Were they meant to advance knowledge, intimidate rival rulers, or just keep the king from getting bored? As you stare, mesmerized at the peacock, a courtier, noticing your astonishment, might lean in and whisper that this is all the work of the master, the Rais al-Amal, the chief engineer. He is a man who can command brass and water to mimic life itself. A man they call the wonder of the age. He is the work of the master. Al-Jazari, the man whose name echoes in the courtyard, isn't what you expect. You turn, scanning the archways for a figure draped in silken robes, perhaps a vizier with a lofty expression and hands clasped behind his back. But the person who catches your eye is standing near a small, trickling fountain, his head cocked as if listening to its rhythm. He is dressed not in the finery of the court, but in the practical tunic of a master craftsman. His hands, you notice, are not soft and pale. They are calloused, with faint traces of grease under the nails and a smudge of ink on his thumb. This is Badaz al-Zaman Abu al-Iz Ismail ibn al-Razzaz al-Jazar. Let's just stick with Al-Jazari, shall we? Trying to say the full name 3 times fast is a surefire way to summon a demon who only speaks in quadratic equations. The name Al-Jazari simply means the man from Jazira, the region of Upper Mesopotamia, nestled between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers. It's where he was born, in the city of Shizre, but his honorific title, Bada al-Zaman, is the one that truly defines him in the eyes of his peers. It translates to the wonder of the age. No pressure, right? It's like being introduced at a party as the most interesting person in the room. You'd immediately feel the urge to spill a drink on yourself just to appear more human. But for Al-Jazari, the title seems less like an exaggeration and more like a simple statement of fact. His focus is entirely on the fountain, a small, unassuming thing of bronze and stone. He reaches out and makes a minuscule adjustment to a valve hidden beneath a carved leaf, and the pitch of the water's gurgle changes, becoming a more pleasing, resonant hum. He nods, satisfied. This is the chief engineer, the Rais al-Amal of the Artukid court. His job title sounds grand, and it is, but it's a hands-on kind of grandeur. He is the master of all things ingenious. The court's go-to problem solver. Does the palace need a more efficient way to lift water from the river for the royal baths and gardens? Al-Jazari designs it. Does the Sultan require a new unbreachable gate for the citadel? Al-Jazari draws the plans. Does the visiting dignitary need to be entertained with a marvel that speaks of the dynasty's wealth and sophistication? Al-Jazari builds it. This position is a legacy. He inherited it from his father, and by the time you see him now, he has served the court for over 25 years, a constant brilliant fixture across the reigns of 3 different Artukid rulers. He is as much a part of this palace as the stones themselves. You watch as he pulls a small rolled parchment from his belt. He unrolls it, revealing a complex drawing of gears and levers, annotated with precise flowing script. His world, you realize, is a tapestry of mechanisms. Where you see a simple door, he sees a system of hinges and balances. Where you see a river, he sees potential energy waiting to be converted into kinetic force. His mind is a whirring, clicking, beautiful machine, constantly deconstructing the world into its constituent parts and then reassembling them in more interesting ways. He isn't just a builder, he is a systems thinker of the highest order. Despite the incredible detail he pours into these technical drawings, we know almost nothing about him as a person. His writings, his great book, are a meticulous guide to building his creations, but they contain no diary entries, no complaints about his boss, no mentions of his family. His entire identity, the only part of him that has survived the centuries, is his work. He is a ghost in his own magnificent machines. His gaze lifts from the parchment and sweeps across the courtyard, but he isn't admiring the architecture. His eyes trace the path of the water channels running beneath the flagstones, calculating flow rates and pressure. He glances at the sun, noting its angle, perhaps contemplating how its movement could be used to trigger a mechanism inside one of his famous clocks. He is a man perpetually at work, even when he appears to be standing still. Historians still argue whether Al-Jazari saw himself primarily as a practical engineer, improving on ancient Greek knowledge, or as a pioneering inventor, creating fundamentally new mechanisms. The truth, as you watch him, seems to be that he wouldn't have even understood the distinction. For him, knowledge was a continuum. He studied the works of the Banu Musa brothers of Hero of Alexandria, not to copy them, but to stand on their shoulders. He absorbed their principles, identified their shortcomings, and then leaped far beyond them. He wasn't content to make a device that simply worked. It had to work elegantly. It had to be beautiful. It had to have a touch of theater, a flair for the dramatic. The gears weren't just hidden away. Their movements were often part of the spectacle. The flow of water wasn't just a power source. It was the lifeblood of an artificial creature, its gurgle a form of speech. A court poet might use words to create an illusion of life and emotion. Al-Jazari does it with polished copper, carefully balanced weights, and the inexorable pull of gravity. As he rolls up his parchment and tucks it back into his belt, his expression is one of quiet, profound concentration. He is a man who speaks the language of the physical world, a fluent translator between human desire and mechanical possibility. His work is not just for show, it is a fundamental reordering of the environment, a bending of natural laws to serve human ingenuity. And to do this kind of work, To build such expensive, elaborate, and frankly unnecessary marvels, you need one very important thing: a patron with deep pockets and an even deeper appreciation for showing off. Your gaze is drawn past the engineer, toward the gilded balconies of the main palace where the banners of the Artukid dynasty hang, limp in the warm, still air. Those banners hanging from the gilded balconies belong to the House of Artuk. You are in the capital of their little corner of the world, the formidable walled city of Amid, known today as Diyarbakir. The Artukids are a Turkoman dynasty, a clan of warriors who carved out a kingdom for themselves here in eastern Anatolia, amid the messy, chaotic aftermath of the Seljuk Empire's fragmentation. Their world is complicated. To the west, you have the remnants of the Byzantine Empire and the unpredictable Crusader states. To the south, the powerful Zengids and later the Ayyubids under Saladin are throwing their weight around. The Artukids are not the biggest players on the block. They are, in modern geopolitical terms, a regional power trying very hard not to get squashed. And when you can't always compete in terms of sheer military might, you compete in other ways. You compete in culture. You compete in sophistication. You build a court so dazzling, so full of art and science and wonder, that it projects an aura of power and stability far beyond your borders. This is why Al-Jazari is so important. His incredible automata are more than just delightful toys. They are instruments of statecraft. Every time a visiting ambassador is offered a drink by a life-sized mechanical servant, or washes his hands in a basin tended by automated peacocks, a very clear message is being sent. We are not just provincial warlords. We are patrons of genius. We are civilized, we are wealthy, and our ingenuity is boundless. It's the 12th century equivalent of having a space program. You might not actually use it to go to the moon, but it looks incredibly impressive and makes everyone think twice before starting trouble with you. Let's be honest, it's a much better deterrent than just having a really big moat. People get used to moats. Nobody gets used to a robot butler offering them a fresh towel. The court itself is a vibrant cosmopolitan hub. Thanks to the Artukids' relatively pragmatic and tolerant rule, Amid is a magnet for scholars, poets, mystics, and artisans from across the known world. In the palace gardens, you can hear Arabic, Persian, Turkish, Armenian, and Syriac being spoken. Muslim theologians debate with Christian and Jewish scholars. Merchants from Venice haggle with traders from the Silk Road. It's this constant influx of new ideas, new techniques, and new perspectives that creates the fertile ground in which someone like Al-Jazari can thrive. He has access to Greek texts on mechanics preserved in Arabic, Persian artistic traditions, and Turkic engineering know-how. He is a focal point where all these streams of knowledge converge. The Artukids even reflected this cultural fusion in their money. While most Islamic rulers followed a strict tradition of aniconic coinage, that is, coins with only calligraphy, the Artukids minted some wonderfully strange pieces. They struck coins that featured their own names and titles in beautiful Arabic script on one side, but on the other they stamped vivid figural images borrowed from the cultures around them. Portraits of Roman emperors, ancient Sasanian kings, or Byzantine Christian figures. It was a brilliant piece of branding, a way of saying, we are the heirs to all of these great empires. It was also probably quite confusing if you weren't paying attention. You might think you had a Roman denarius until you flipped it over and realized it was basically an advertisement for a local Turkoman emir. Historians still argue whether the Artukids' lavish spending on automata and other marvels was a sign of a flourishing and secure economy, or a calculated political theater designed to mask underlying military and political vulnerabilities in a very dangerous neighborhood. Was this genuine prosperity, or were they just putting on a really good show for their rivals? Looking at the opulence around you, it's hard to say. The wealth feels real, but there's also a palpable sense of performance to it all. The specific ruler who provides the catalyst for Al-Jazari's greatest achievement is a man named Nasir al-Din Mahmud, who ruled from 1200 to 1222. It is he who, after years of watching Al-Jazari create these one-of-a-kind wonders, gives him the fateful command. As you watch the balcony, you can almost see the scene unfold. The ruler, fascinated by a new device, turns to his loyal engineer. In his own words, Al-Jazari writes that the king told him, "You have made these devices, and through your labors, they have been brought to completion. Let not your efforts be wasted. I wish you to compose for me a book which will assemble all that you have created." For Al-Jazari, this was likely both an honor and a terrifying prospect. It's one thing to be a master builder, working with your hands and intuitive knowledge. It's quite another to write it all down, to translate the silent language of gears and levers into the clumsy medium of words and pictures, to create a guide so clear that others might one day replicate your genius. Without that royal command, Al-Jazari's knowledge might have simply died with him, his secrets lost forever, his machines crumbling to dust and remembered only as court legends. But Nasir al-Din understood the importance of legacy. He didn't just want the machines, he wanted the knowledge itself captured and preserved. It was an act of profound foresight. The king's request elevates Al-Jazari from a mere craftsman to an author, a teacher, a historical figure. It is the moment that ensures our journey here, tonight, is even possible. The king wanted a book, a special book, bound in leather and illustrated with brilliant color, a testament to the glory of his court and the genius of his chief engineer. And as the sun begins to set over the Tigris, casting long shadows across the courtyard, you can imagine Al-Jazari retreating to his workshop, the royal command echoing in his mind, ready to begin the monumental task of creating his masterpiece. You are in Al-Jazari's workshop now. The air is thick with the scent of cedar shavings, hot metal, and melting wax. Along the walls, shelves are laden with the tools of his trade: saws, files, calipers, and drills. On a large wooden table, half-finished components lie in wait: a polished copper sphere, a stack of precisely cut wooden discs, a float valve carved from a block of mulberry wood. But the focus of the room, the center of this creative gravity, is not a machine. It's a book, or rather, the pages of a book, laid out to dry. Al-Jazari, the man of gears and levers, is now also a man of ink and parchment. He leans over a page, a fine brush in his hand, dabbing a spot of brilliant blue paint, lapis lazuli, ground to a fine powder and mixed with gum arabic, onto an intricate diagram. This is the project commissioned by the king, the work that will consume the final years of Al-Jazari's life and become his immortal legacy. The full title is Kitab F. Marifat al-Hiyal al-Handasiyya. It translates to the Book of Knowledge of Ingenious Mechanical Devices. The key word here is hayal. It's a wonderful Arabic term that means more than just devices. It carries a sense of ingenuity, of cleverness, even of a stratagem or a delightful trick. It hints that these machines are not just brute force contraptions. They are elegant solutions, possessing a kind of mechanical wit. They are designed to surprise and enchant. It is the difference between a simple machine that does a job and a Rube Goldberg machine that does a job with impeccable, hilarious style. Al-Jazari's work is all about that style. As you draw closer, you see that the book is a masterwork of organization. This isn't a chaotic notebook of a mad inventor. It's a meticulously structured textbook. Completed in the year 1206, it details the construction of 50 different devices, which Al-Jazari has neatly sorted into 6 distinct categories. Chapter by chapter, he lays out his world of wonders. The first category is clocks, monumental water clocks and candle clocks that do far more than just tell time. The second is vessels and automata for courtly gatherings, basically fancy robot butlers for royal parties. The third details pitchers and basins for ritual hand-washing and bloodletting. The fourth describes fountains that change shape and automata that play music. The fifth, and arguably most practical, covers machines for raising water. And the final, sixth category is a miscellany of other clever things: an enormous palace gate, a combination lock, a protractor. For each of the 50 devices, the formula is the same, a testament to Al-Jazari's systematic mind. First, he describes what the device is and what it does. Then, in painstaking detail, he explains how to build it, specifying dimensions, materials, and assembly procedures. Finally, and most crucially, he provides one or more large, brilliantly colored illustrations that show exactly what he's talking about. These aren't just sketches, they are technical diagrams of the highest order, complete with labels, cross-sections, and views from different angles. It's a DIY manual for the 13th century, written with such clarity that you feel you could almost start building one of these things yourself. provided you had a fully equipped bronze foundry and a PhD in medieval hydraulics, of course. This approach was revolutionary. Craftsmen and engineers of his time, and indeed for centuries after, guarded their techniques as trade secrets. Knowledge was power, and you didn't just give it away. But Al-Jazari, at the behest of his king, does the exact opposite. He lays it all bare. He wants you to understand. He wants you to build. He's the original open-source hardware guy. Historians still argue whether the book was intended as a literal, practical guide for other engineers, or as a magnificent presentation piece for the king, a kind of royal portfolio designed to immortalize the achievements of the court rather than to be copied. Was it a textbook or a coffee table book? Looking at the sheer practicality of the instructions, it feels like the former, but the lavish, artistic quality of the illustrations makes a strong case for the latter. Perhaps it was both. One of the most beautiful surviving copies of his manuscript, now housed in the Topkapi Palace in Istanbul, is filled with illustrations so rich in color and detail that they are masterpieces of Islamic art in their own right. The style is unusually vibrant and figurative for the period, leading some scholars to suggest that the artists who painted them may have come from the Christian manuscript workshops that were common in the region. It speaks to that cosmopolitan world of the Artikids, where a Muslim engineer could collaborate with Christian artists to create a book of scientific wonders for a Turkoman king. The whole project is a beautiful testament to cultural fusion. As you imagine flipping through the heavy parchment pages, you realize you're not just looking at a historical document. You're looking at a blueprint for a forgotten future, a branch of technological evolution that prized beauty and wonder as much as efficiency. This is a world where technology wasn't about sterile function, but about creating mechanical poetry. And the man who wrote it was as much an artist as he was an engineer. Holding the essence of this book in your mind, the question becomes unavoidable. What exactly was this man? If you were to write his job description today, what would you put? The modern world loves its neat, tidy boxes. You're a scientist or an engineer or an artist or an inventor. You specialize. You stay in your lane. But Al-Jazari's ghost just smiles and waves as he speeds past all of them, somehow occupying every lane at once. Trying to pin a single label on him is like trying to nail water to a wall. You'll just make a mess, and the water will be gone. Let's start with the most obvious and respected title, engineer. In fact, many today call him the father of robotics or the father of modern engineering. This case is easy to make. His work is relentlessly practical. He provides precise measurements. He specifies materials. He describes the process of casting bronze in closed mold boxes with green sand, a technique that wouldn't become common in Europe for centuries. He details how to laminate timber to minimize warping. This is not the work of a flighty artist. This is the methodical, systematic process of a master builder who understands his materials on an intimate level. His descriptions of water-raising machines are pure civil engineering, designed to improve agriculture and daily life. It's the kind of solid, practical work that gets things done and doesn't necessarily get you invited to the most exciting parties. But then you look closer, and the artist inside the engineer becomes impossible to ignore. There is an obsessive aesthetic quality to everything he designs. He could have made a simple pointer for his clocks, but instead, he crafts the figure of a scribe whose pen points to the hour. He could have made a simple spout for a hand-washing basin, but he designs an entire diorama with a peacock whose tail feathers fan out as the water pours from its beak. These artistic flourishes are not necessary for the function of the machine. They exist for one reason only: to create beauty and delight. His work is a conversation between the functional and the beautiful. He is as much a sculptor as he is a mechanic, treating gears and levers with the same artistic reverence that a painter would afford their pigments. This leads to the third possible label: court entertainer, a showman, perhaps even a magician. Because what were these elaborate clocks and automated servants if not the ultimate form of courtly entertainment? They were designed to create a spectacle, to elicit gasps of wonder from jaded courtiers and to overwhelm foreign ambassadors with the sheer cleverness of the Artukid dynasty. Imagine the scene. The king hosts a banquet. He makes a subtle gesture. Across the room, a mechanical maiden glides forward, offering a cup of wine to a guest. The guest, who has never seen anything that moves on its own without being an animal or a person, probably drops the cup in shock. It's theater. It's performance art. Al-Jazari was the chief Imagineer of his day, using his technical genius to create moments of pure, unadulterated magic. One of his more subtle but brilliant creations was a 4-dial combination lock, one of the earliest of its kind. To an uninitiated observer, a box that would only open for the person who knew the secret combination of letters would seem to be enchanted, an object bound by a magic spell. So which is it? The practical engineer, the visionary artist, or the master showman? The truth is that he was all of them, seamlessly integrated into a single creative force. The division between these fields is a modern invention. For a polymath like Al-Jazari, they were all just different languages for describing and reshaping the world. Scholars still debate whether the automata were primarily symbols of the ruler's power and ability to command nature, or if they represented a deeper philosophical interest in the nature of life and the possibility of creating artificial beings. Was the automated band of musicians just a cool toy, or was it a commentary on the very essence of creation and consciousness? We will likely never know his deepest motivations. What we do know is that he was a master of synthesis. He could think like a scientist, build like an engineer, and dream like an artist. He saw the world not as a collection of separate disciplines, but as an interconnected whole. The same principles of harmony and proportion that governed a beautiful painting could be applied to the meshing of 2 gears. The rhythm of a poem could be found in the steady, repeating cycle of a water-powered pump. He refused to accept that the useful could not also be beautiful, or that the beautiful could not also be astonishingly clever. He was operating on a different level, a level where the lines blur and the distinctions we take for granted simply cease to exist. To truly understand the genius of this man, we have to stop trying to fit him into our boxes. We need to get our hands dirty, metaphorically speaking. We need to look under the hood of his magnificent creations and examine the core components, the clever little pieces of mechanical DNA that he used to bring his visions to life. And one of the most important of these, a piece that seems almost ridiculously simple at first glance, is a lumpy, unassuming piece of rotating metal or wood known as the cam. Let's talk about the cam. It doesn't sound like much, does it? It sounds less like a revolutionary piece of technology and more like something you'd find in a dusty corner of a hardware store. But this simple, unassuming component is one of the fundamental building blocks of Al-Jazari's genius. It's the secret language he used to write physical programs, to encode complex movements into a piece of wood or metal. At its core, a cam is just a shaped piece of material, often like a lopsided circle or an egg, that spins around an axle. As it spins, its irregular shape pushes against another component, a lever or a rod called a follower. The follower is forced to move back and forth or up and down, precisely following the cam's lumpy profile. Think of it like this. Imagine you're driving a car with a square wheel. You'd be bounced up and down in a very specific and deeply uncomfortable pattern. The square wheel is the cam, and you are the follower. The magic of the cam is its ability to translate simple, continuous rotary motion, a wheel turning endlessly, into customized, complex, non-continuous linear motion. You can make the follower move slowly, then quickly, then pause for a moment, and then move again, all just by changing the shape of the cam. The shape of the lump is the code. It's a mechanical instruction set, and while Al-Jazari did not invent the absolute basic concept of the cam, crude versions were known to Hellenistic engineers like Hero of Alexandria for simple single actions, he perfected it and elevated it into a sophisticated tool for orchestration. Where Al-Jazari made his revolutionary leap was in placing multiple cams along a single rotating axle. This transforms a simple cam into a mighty camshaft. Now, this is a term you've probably heard in relation to car engines, and for good reason. It's the same fundamental principle. The camshaft was, for Al-Jazari, the mechanical brain of his most complex automata. Imagine one of his most famous creations, the musical robot band designed to entertain guests on a boat in a lake. You have 4 musicians, a harpist, a flutist, and 2 drummers. How do you make them play a coordinated rhythm, not just a chaotic mess of noise? You use a camshaft. Hidden beneath the figures is a wooden cylinder, the axle, which is turned at a steady pace by the flow of water. Sticking out from the cylinder are dozens of small pegs, the cams. As this cylinder rotates, one peg pushes a small lever connected to the right drummer's arm. Clack. The drumstick hits the drum. The cylinder turns a little more. Another peg, positioned at a different angle, engages a lever for the flutist, triggering a valve that blows air through the flute to create a note. Toot. A little more rotation, and two pegs strike levers for the left drummer simultaneously. Clack, clack. By carefully positioning these pegs, or cams, around the cylinder, Al-Jazari could dictate the entire musical composition. He could control the timing, the rhythm, and the sequence of every single note. Want a different song? Build a new camshaft with the pegs in a different arrangement. It is, in the most literal sense, a programmable music box. It's the ancestor of the player piano, the music box, and even the modern digital sequencer. But it's all done mechanically. Historians still argue whether Al-Jazari's use of the camshaft was a revolutionary leap of pure invention or a brilliant, but incremental synthesis of pre-existing cam and trip hammer mechanisms that were already in use in Islamic watermills and industrial settings. Trip hammers, used for things like crushing grain, used a similar rotating axle with lugs to lift and drop a hammer. Did Al-Jazari see this industrial application and have the creative spark to adapt it for the delicate, precise movements of automata? It seems likely. His genius wasn't always about pure invention from nothing. It was about seeing a principle in one context and brilliantly applying it to a completely different one. So you're standing there, in the workshop, and Al-Jazari shows you one of these camshafts. It's a simple-looking thing, a wooden cylinder with pegs sticking out at odd angles. It looks a bit like a medieval back massager, something you'd definitely want to keep away from your spine. But then he places it in a model, connects it to a few levers, and starts to turn it. And suddenly a little wooden figure starts to move, not randomly but with apparent intention. It lifts an arm, pauses, turns its head, and then lowers the arm. It's a sequence, a story, told by bumps on a stick. You can hear the gentle thump, click, whir, thump as the cams engage and disengage the followers. It's the sound of a physical program being executed, the steady heartbeat of the machine's hidden intelligence. With the cam and the camshaft, Al-Jazari unlocked the secret to creating complex, lifelike, and seemingly intelligent behavior. But to make this brain work, to turn the camshaft at a steady, reliable pace, he needed a heart. He needed a power source that was smooth, constant, and readily available. He needed the one thing his world had in abundance, the power of moving water. So you have this marvelous mechanical brain, the camshaft, ready to conduct an orchestra of automata. But a brain is useless without a heartbeat, a steady pulse of energy to bring it to life. In our world, you'd just plug it into the wall. You'd tap into the silent, invisible river of electrons flowing behind the plaster. But here in the 12th century, the river is literal. The lifeblood of every single one of Al-Jazari's complex creations is water. If the camshaft is the code, then hydraulics, the science of moving water, is the operating system. It's the fundamental force that powers every gear, trips every lever, and animates every figure. For Al-Jazari, turning on a machine meant the gentle, gurgling rush of opening a sluice gate. He harnessed water in two brilliantly distinct ways. First, there was the power of water in motion, hydraulics. This is the brute force. By directing a controlled flow of water over a water wheel or through a turbine, he could generate a smooth, continuous rotational motion. This is the prime mover, the engine of his world. A hidden reservoir, high up in the machine, would provide a constant supply of water that would fall due to gravity, spinning a wheel at a very predictable and steady rate. The consistency of this rotation was absolutely crucial. For his magnificent clocks, a steady rotation meant accurate timekeeping. For his musical automata, it meant an unwavering tempo. Any sputtering or change in the flow and the whole illusion of life would falter. The robot drummer would suddenly sound like he'd had way too much coffee. But then there's the second, more subtle way he used water. The power of water at rest, or hydrostatics. This is where he gets really clever. This is how he created his triggers, his sensors, his timers. The main tool here is the simple float valve. Imagine a small chamber hidden inside the machine that is slowly filling with water from a tiny spout. Inside this chamber is a float, a small hollow ball of copper perhaps. As the water level rises, so does the float. When it reaches a specific height, an arm attached to the float trips a lever, releases a ball, or opens a valve. Click. An event is triggered. This is a perfect mechanical timer. By controlling the rate of water flow into the chamber, Al-Jazari could determine precisely how long it would take for the event to be triggered. He could set things to happen every minute, every hour, or just once a day. And to make these actions cyclical, he used another ancient and wonderfully clever device: the siphon. Once the chamber was full and the float had done its job, a siphon, a simple bent tube, would automatically activate, draining all the water out of the chamber in a sudden gushing rush. The float would drop back to the bottom, and the whole process would begin again. Fill, trigger, empty, repeat. It's a beautiful, self-regulating feedback loop, a perfect natural rhythm that he incorporated into the guts of his machines. Scholars still debate whether Al-Jazari's understanding of fluid dynamics was based on theoretical principles passed down from Greek scholars like Archimedes and Philo, or if it was derived almost entirely from empirical knowledge and hands-on experimentation, a kind of if it works engineering. He rarely mentions the theoretical principles in his book. He just tells you exactly how to build the thing that works perfectly. His mastery of these principles allowed him to create things that seem almost impossible for the era, like an automated waitress that could serve drinks. He describes a wheeled cart with a large reservoir of wine or another beverage inside. On top sits the figure of a maiden holding a cup and a tap. When you placed your own cup on a small platform, its weight would trigger a valve, dispensing the drink for a set period of time before automatically shutting off. It's a 13th century drink dispenser. You can just imagine the chaos at a royal party when that thing gets loose. You're standing there in his workshop and he points to a large, open-sided model of a clock. You can see the whole system in action. The main water wheel turns with a rhythmic, gentle creak, creak, creak. Its axle disappears into a tangle of gears. Above it, you see the float chambers, the water levels slowly, silently rising. You hear the constant, meditative drip, drip, drip of the spouts that feed them. The entire machine feels alive, breathing with a liquid pulse. The air is cool and damp. It's a symphony of controlled water, a complex dance of flow and pressure, of gravity and buoyancy. This complete mastery over water is the foundation of his art. But simply turning a wheel, no matter how steadily, wasn't enough. The real challenge was taking that one simple motion, rotation, and converting it into the variety of other motions needed to power his most ambitious projects. He needed a way to turn a circle into a straight line, and for that, he used a device that would, 6 centuries later, become the very heart of the Industrial Revolution. You have the power of water turning a wheel, creating a steady, endless rotation. It's a beautiful thing, but it's also mechanically monotonous. The world doesn't just spin in circles. Sometimes you need to push, to pull, to go back and forth in a straight line. You need to convert that gentle, continuous rotation into a powerful, reciprocating pulse. The bicycle pedal is a simple crank. Your foot pushes up and down to create rotation. Al-Jazari needed to do the reverse. Use rotation to create a powerful up and down or back and forth motion. And the device he used for this is, without exaggeration, one of the most important single mechanisms in the history of technology. It's called the crankshaft. In Al-Jazari's book, you find the first known detailed diagram and description of a fully developed crankshaft system. Let that sink in for a moment. This component, the absolute heart of the internal combustion engine, the core of the massive steam engines that drove the Industrial Revolution, is laid out in brilliant color on a piece of parchment in 1206. It is like finding the blueprints for a microprocessor in a medieval monastery. It feels like it shouldn't be there. A simple crank, just a single pin on a wheel, had been around for a while in things like rotary hand grindstones. But what Al-Jazari illustrates is the whole system, a true crankshaft with multiple throws, connected by rods to pistons, all working in concert. It was a quantum leap in mechanical design. You can see its most powerful application in his designs for water-raising pumps. Imagine you're looking at a cross-section of his twin-cylinder pump. First, you have the water wheel, turned by a flowing stream, or by an animal. The wheel's rotation is transferred by a pair of rugged wooden gear wheels to a horizontal shaft. This shaft isn't straight. It has two U-shaped bends in it 180 degrees opposite each other. This is the crankshaft. Attached to these bends are long, straight wooden connecting rods. The other end of each rod is attached to a piston, which slides back and forth inside a copper cylinder. Now watch what happens. As the main gear turns the crankshaft, the first U-bend moves up and forward, pushing its connecting rod and piston forward. This forces water out of the first cylinder. At the exact same time, the second U-bend on the opposite side of the shaft is moving down and back, pulling its connecting rod and piston backward, sucking water into the second cylinder. The rotation continues and the motion reverses. The first piston pulls back, the second piston pushes forward. It's a perfectly balanced, continuous push-pull motion. Shove-hiss, pull-slurp, shove-hiss, pull-slurp. It's an incredibly efficient way to pump a large volume of water. It's a mechanical heart, with two pistons for ventricles beating with a steady, powerful rhythm. This invention is so significant that it's almost impossible to overstate. The ability to convert rotary to reciprocating motion smoothly and continuously is the key that unlocks almost every major mechanical advancement of the next 700 years. Without this principle, there is no steam locomotive pushing its pistons to turn the wheels. There is no car engine, no propeller plane. It all comes back to this fundamental concept. Historians still argue whether Al-Jazari's crankshaft was an independent invention born from logical necessity, or if he was somehow aware of earlier, undocumented crankshaft-like mechanisms from China or the classical world that have since been lost to history. There is some evidence for a very crude crank system in a Roman sawmill from the 5th century, but it appears to have been a technological one-off, a brilliant idea that was completely lost to Europe for a millennium. Al-Jazari's design, by contrast, was meticulously documented and integrated into a sophisticated machine, ready to be built. It is frankly mind-boggling. It's one thing to create whimsical automata for a king's court. It's another entirely to invent a mechanism that will fundamentally reshape the world, even if the world wouldn't be ready for it for another 6 centuries. You're looking at the diagram in his book, the clean lines of the crankshaft and pistons, and you realize you're not just seeing a clever pump. You're seeing the ghost of a future he could not have possibly imagined. A future of industry and mass transportation, all contained in this elegant, ingenious drawing. He had the mechanical heart, but for his most precise creations, his clocks, he needed more than just a heart. He needed a pulse. He needed a way to chop up the smooth flow of time into discrete, measurable beats. And for that, he turned to other clever timing mechanisms. The crankshaft is a masterpiece of continuous power, a mechanical heart beating with a steady shove and pull. But for a clock, continuous motion is the enemy. A clock's job is not to move smoothly. Its job is to chop up the relentless flowing river of time into small, digestible, identical chunks. It needs to stop and start. It needs a pulse. It needs to go tick, and then, a moment later, tock. The mechanism that creates this tick-tock, that arrests the continuous flow of energy and lets it out in controlled rhythmic bursts, is called an escapement. It's the single most important component of any timekeeping device. And Al-Jazari, without the springs and pendulums that would define European clockmaking centuries later, had to invent his own using the only element he had: water. Step into his workshop again and look at the model of his great castle clock. Deep within its guts, you find the source of its precision. It's not a complex series of gears, but something shockingly simple: a small, delicately balanced bucket made of copper. This is the famous tipping bucket, and it is Al-Jazari's hydraulic escapement. Above it, a spout delivers a tiny controlled stream of water. Drip, drip, drip. You watch as the bucket slowly fills. It's a patient, silent process. As the water level rises, the bucket's center of gravity shifts. It becomes top-heavy, unstable, teetering on its pivot. It reaches a critical point where a single final drop is all it takes. The bucket suddenly and swiftly tips over, spilling its contents with a satisfying splash into a channel that carries the water away. But the tipping motion is the key. As it tips, it pulls on a thin string. This string is connected to a release mechanism on the main gear train of the clock. For a brief moment, the gears are unlocked. They are pulled forward by a weight, advancing by the space of a single tooth with a solid clank. This motion is what changes the display on the clock's face, perhaps moving an automated figure or dropping a metal ball into a gong to chime the hour. As soon as the bucket is empty, its counterweight makes it swing back to its upright position, ready to start the cycle all over again. Drip, drip, drip. The process repeats, creating a perfectly regular pulse that governs the entire machine. The time between each clank is determined by how fast the water drips, a rate Al-Jazari controlled, with a sophisticated float and tap system called a flow regulator, which ensured the drip rate remained constant, even as the main reservoir emptied. This tipping bucket is the talk of his water clock. It's a brilliant, simple, and reliable solution to one of engineering's most difficult problems. Of course, he didn't limit himself to just water. For his candle clocks, he devised an equally clever system. He used a massive, specially made candle that burned at a very precise and known rate. The candle was placed in a holder, and as the wax was consumed, the entire candle would be pushed upwards from below. Attached to the base was a system of pulleys and weights that would be released incrementally, triggering automata, like his famous falcon that would drop a bronze ball onto a cymbal every hour. It was a way to mark time in the dead of night, and it came with its own hourly alarm clock. Definitely an upgrade from the rooster. Scholars still debate whether the tipping bucket mechanism, also found in earlier Chinese and Greek designs, was independently developed by Al-Jazari, or if he was working from descriptions of these earlier devices that may have reached him through translations or travelers' accounts. Whatever its origins, it was Al-Jazari who perfected it and integrated it as the central controller for his most monumental and complex timekeeping machines. By combining these different timing mechanisms, the fast pulse of the tipping bucket for minutes, the slow cycle of the float and siphon for hours, he could create multiple layers of automated events, all running in perfect synchrony. You are mesmerized by the little copper bucket in the model, the steady, patient filling, the pregnant pause before the tip, the sudden release of energy, and then the return to quiet patience. It is the true heartbeat of this magnificent creation. It is a quiet, rhythmic engine of precision, turning the chaos of flowing water into the measured, orderly march of time. Now that you understand how he created this precise, repeating beat, you can begin to see how he could apply the same principles to something even more whimsical and alive. He could take that rhythm and, using his other secret weapon, the camshaft, he could turn it into music. You now understand the building blocks of Al-Jazari's world: the cam for programming movement, water for power, the crankshaft for converting motion, and the tipping bucket for creating a precise rhythm. You have all the pieces. Now let's put them together to create something not just functional, not just precise, but something genuinely magical. Let's create music. Your journey takes you from the dusty workshop to the manicured gardens of the Artukid Palace. A gentle breeze rustles the leaves of the cypress trees. You are standing on the shore of a large, placid pool, its surface like dark glass. Drifting silently into the center of the pool is a magnificent, ornate boat. It's not large, but every inch of it is beautifully painted and decorated. On its deck, you see the life-sized figures of 4 musicians, seated on elegant cushions. There is a harpist, a flutist, and 2 drummers with small kettle drums. They are frozen, their lacquered eyes staring blankly, their instruments held in silent readiness. The boat comes to a gentle stop in the middle of the lake, a silent floating diorama. A courtier on the shore turns a hidden valve near the water's edge. For a moment, nothing happens. Then you hear it, a low gurgle from within the boat. And suddenly, life. The right-hand drummer's arm jerks up and strikes his drum with a sharp rap. A half-second later, the other drummer follows. The flutist raises his instrument to his lips and a clear, piercing note drifts across the water. The harpist's fingers begin to move, plucking a delicate arpeggio from the strings. It's not a cacophony. It's not a simple, repetitive nursery rhyme. It's a complex, coordinated piece of music with a distinct rhythm and melody, played by a band of robots in the middle of a lake. To a 13th century observer, this would be nothing short of sorcery. But you know the secret. You can see the ghost in the machine. Hidden beneath the deck out of sight is the ingenious system you've just learned about. A flow of water is being channeled into the boat from a hidden intake, turning a small water wheel. The wheel provides the steady rotation. This rotation turns the master camshaft, that long cylinder of wood studded with carefully placed pegs. This is the song, written in the language of bumps and levers. As the camshaft turns, the pegs engage with the ends of levers connected to the musicians' bodies. A peg for the drummer's right arm, a peg for his left, another to trigger a small bellows that forces air through the flute. Dozens of pegs, each one a musical note arranged in a precise sequence around the spinning drum. The machine is literally reading a piece of physical code. Some versions of the boat even included a couple of automated clowns who would clash cymbals and do a little jig, because Al-Jazari apparently knew that every good band needs a hype man. This is where we must introduce a word that feels far too modern for this context: programmability. This musical boat isn't just an automaton, it is a programmable automaton. The hardware, the boat, the musicians, the levers is distinct from the software, the song encoded on the camshaft. In his book, Al-Jazari makes it clear that if the king grew tired of the current tune, a new one could be played simply by building a new camshaft with the pegs arranged in a different pattern and swapping it out. It is a medieval jukebox. You can change the record. This is a monumentally important concept. The idea that a machine's function is not fixed, but can be altered by changing a removable, data-carrying component, is the very essence of modern computing. Musicologists and historians still argue whether the musical pieces programmed into the camshaft were original compositions by Al-Jazari himself, or if they were popular courtly tunes of the Artukid period that he mechanically transcribed. Was he both an engineer and a composer? Or was he the world's first music producer, sampling the popular hits of his day? Either way, the technical achievement is staggering. As the last notes of the song fade, and the musicians freeze once more into silent stillness, the impact of the performance settles over you. It's one thing to build a machine that is useful, like a pump. It's another to build one that is precise, like a clock. But to build a machine whose sole purpose is to create art, to generate beauty, that is an entirely different level of genius. This wonderful, whimsical, water-powered band is a testament to a mind that saw no boundaries between the artistic and the technical. But even this is just a prelude. Now that you've seen the principles in action, it's time to witness his magnum opus, a creation that combines everything you've learned on a scale so grand and complex, it's almost difficult to comprehend. You are led away from the tranquility of the garden pool and back inside the palace, but this time, you are brought to the grand reception hall. The air here is different. It's thick with the scent of incense and the low, respectful murmur of courtiers and ambassadors. Sunlight streams through high, arched windows, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. Your guide gestures towards the center of the hall and you see it. And you stop. Everyone stops the first time they see it. It is, for lack of a better word, a masterpiece. It is the elephant in the room, both literally and figuratively. Standing before you, at least twice your height, is Al-Jazari's legendary elephant clock. The base of the entire structure is a life-sized, magnificently decorated elephant, crafted from wood and metal, complete with a turbaned driver, or mahout, perched on its neck. The elephant is Indian. On the elephant's back rests a complex multi-layered tower, or howdah. At the base of this tower, two great coiling dragons with shimmering scales face outward. They are distinctly Chinese in their style. Above them is a small balcony with ornate arches, from which the figure of a robed man will periodically appear. He represents the Arab world of Islam, and some believe this figure is meant to be the great Sultan, Saladin. Above him sits a scribe, pen in hand, poised over a dial marked with the hours. And at the very pinnacle of the structure, perched atop a golden dome, is a mythical bird, the Persian simurgh or phoenix, ready to spin and cry out. The whole thing is a riot of color, of polished brass and rich silks, of intricate detail and monumental presence. Before you even begin to wonder how it works, you must first understand what it is. This is not just a timekeeping device. It is a profound political and cultural statement. It is a mechanical celebration of cosmopolitanism. Al-Jazari himself wrote that he wanted to create something that reflected the universal nature of his civilization. So, every element is a carefully chosen symbol. The Indian elephant for the subcontinent, the Chinese dragons for the Far East, the Persian phoenix for the Iranian world, the Arab figures for the heart of Islam, and even falcons, which we will see in a moment, to represent the ruling Turkic house of the Artukids. It is a mechanical United Nations, a declaration in brass and wood, that this court, this city, is a crossroads of the world, a place where all cultures and all knowledge converge. It's the most elaborate and beautiful piece of political propaganda you have ever seen. So what does it do? At the top of every half hour, a symphony of motion begins. The phoenix on top gives a cry and spins. The figure in the balcony emerges, turning from one side to the other. High up in the tower, one of two falcons leans forward and drops a bronze ball from its beak. The ball falls into the open mouth of one of the dragons below. The weight of the ball causes the dragon to slowly pivot downwards like a seesaw, until the ball rolls out of a hole in its neck and drops into a large hidden vase in the belly of the elephant. As the ball hits the bottom of the vase, it strikes a cymbal, creating a loud gong that marks the half hour. The now empty dragon slowly pivots back up into position. The sound of the gong also triggers the mahout on the elephant's neck, who strikes a drum with one hand, and an axe on the elephant's head with the other. Simultaneously, the scribe's pen, which has been slowly moving across the dial for the last 30 minutes, marks the new time. It is a cascade of events, a chain reaction of perfectly timed movements that is as theatrical as it is precise. Historians still argue whether the inclusion of a figure representing Saladin was a specific political homage to the great Ayyubid Sultan, or if the figure was meant to be a more generic representation of a powerful and just Muslim ruler, symbolizing the Artukid king himself. It's a subtle but important distinction about the political message being sent. A curious feature of this clock, revealed in modern reconstructions, is that its hours were not the fixed 60-minute hours we use today. It was calibrated to follow temporal hours, where the period of daylight is always divided into 12 hours, and the period of night is also divided into 12 hours. This means an hour of daylight in the summer was much longer than an hour of daylight in the winter. The clock was designed to automatically adjust for this, a feature that made it perfectly suited to its time but wonderfully baffling to a modern observer. You stand there, utterly captivated by its silent grandeur, waiting for the next half hour to strike. The sheer ambition of it is breathtaking. It is a clock, yes, but it is also a sculpture, an automaton, a political statement, and a piece of theater. Now that you've seen the magnificent exterior, it's time to become invisible, to shrink down and venture inside the elephant's belly to see the ingenious water-powered engine that brings this multicultural giant to life. You take a deep breath and phase through the ornate metal hide of the elephant, slipping into the cavernous space within its belly. It's dark in here. The air is cool and damp, carrying the scent of wet metal and wood. The cacophony of the royal court fades away, replaced by a quiet rhythmic soundscape. The dominant noise is a steady, almost meditative drip. Drip, drip, the sound of water falling from a single point into a larger body of water below. This is the machine room. This is the engine that drives the magnificent spectacle outside. Suspended in the center of this dark space is the clock's heart. A large, beautifully crafted copper bowl. It's floating inside a much larger reservoir of water that fills most of the elephant's torso. You notice a small, precisely drilled hole in the very bottom of this floating bowl. From a small tank hidden high above, a single stream of water is directed to fall perfectly into it. This is a tarjahar, or a perforated bowl, a timekeeping device of ancient Indian and Egyptian origin, but perfected here by Al-Jazari. As the bowl fills with water from the drip, its weight increases, and it begins to sink, slowly and steadily, into the reservoir below. The rate of its descent is the clock. This is what measures the 30-minute interval. Attached to the rim of the sinking bowl are several strong chains that snake upwards, through the elephant's back and into the tower above. As the bowl sinks, these chains are gently pulled down. One of them is connected to the scribe's mechanism, causing his pen to glide slowly across the calibrated dial on the outside, marking the silent passage of the minutes. You watch for what feels like an eternity as the bowl sinks, millimeter by millimeter deeper into the water. The only sounds are the drip and the gentle gurgle of the water. Then, as the rim of the bowl is about to slip beneath the surface, a small trigger is tripped. Suddenly, all is motion. The trigger activates a siphon, a large bent pipe with one end in the floating bowl. With a great whoosh, the siphon rapidly sucks all the water out of the bowl and dumps it back into the main reservoir. The bowl, suddenly empty and buoyant, shoots back up to its starting position at the surface. This rapid upward surge provides the burst of power for the entire half-hourly performance. It's the mechanical equivalent of winding a spring and then letting it go. The chains attached to the rising bowl are yanked sharply upwards, and this single, powerful pull initiates the entire magnificent chain reaction you witnessed from the outside. You can trace the connections. One chain pulls a lever high in the tower that trips the mechanism for one of the two falcons. It tilts, the ball is released. A separate rotating channel, which had been slowly moving into position over the last 30 minutes, ensures the ball drops into the mouth of the correct dragon. One for the first half of the hour, one for the second. The weight of the ball on the dragon's seesaw mechanism pulls another chain, which rotates the Saladin figure. As the dragon's head lowers, the ball rolls out into the hidden vase, striking the symbol. Gong. The shockwave of the sound, or perhaps another finer chain, triggers the mahout's arms to strike the drum and axe. The main upward pull of the bowl also turns the phoenix on its perch. It's a stunningly intricate Rube Goldberg machine, a cascade of cause and effect, all kicked off by a bowl of water emptying. Modern engineers who have reconstructed the clock still debate whether Al-Jazari's original design included a conical valve flow regulator to maintain a constant drip rate into the bowl, a sophisticated feature described in his other clock designs, but not explicitly detailed in the elephant clock chapter, though it is considered essential for its accuracy. It is this hidden perfection, the quiet, precise, and reliable engine, that makes the loud, glorious spectacle possible. Just as the gong sounds, you phase back outside, emerging from the machine's belly. The dragons reset, the figure still, and the quiet drip, drip, drip resumes, patiently counting down the next 30 minutes. The elephant clock was a marvel of public spectacle, but Al-Jazari's genius could be just as potent on a more intimate, personal scale. After the thunderous public pronouncement of the elephant clock, you are now guided to a much quieter, more intimate space. Perhaps it's a private alcove off the main hall, or a secluded corner of a courtyard, shaded by a flowering jasmine vine. Here, the goal is not to impress a crowd of ambassadors, but to provide a moment of personal wonder and service for a single individual. Before you stands a basin made of hammered bronze, gleaming in the soft light. In its center, on a small pedestal, is a sculpture of a peacock, its head held high, its intricate tail feathers lying flat behind it. It's beautiful, but seems to be just a statue. This, however, is Al-Jazari's automated hand-washing attendant. Its purpose is to assist in the ritual of ablution, the washing that precedes prayer, or simply to provide a luxurious way to freshen up before a meal. It is technology in the service of personal ritual and hygiene. Your guide invites you to begin the process. You reach out and pull a small decorated lever on the side of the basin. For a moment, there is only the sound of a faint, internal gurgle. Then a small door at the base of the peacock's pedestal swings open, and a tiny robed figure of a servant glides smoothly out, its hands outstretched. In its hands is a small silver tray holding a lump of fragrant soap. You take the soap. Just as the servant figure comes to a halt, the peacock above it stirs. Its magnificent tail fans out into a brilliant semicircle of painted metal. It then tilts its entire body forward, and from its open beak, a delicate stream of water pours into the basin. You lather your hands with the scented soap and the warm water. The flow continues for a precise amount of time, just long enough for a thorough wash. And then it stops. The peacock tilts back to its upright position. The first servant figure then retreats, disappearing back through its door. A moment of stillness. Then from a second door on the other side of the pedestal, a new servant glides into view. This one holds a small, folded linen towel. As you reach for the towel, the peacock tilts forward once more, this time releasing a larger, more generous flow of water for you to rinse your hands completely. Once you are done, the second servant retreats, its door closing with a soft click. The basin beneath you quickly drains, leaving it clean for the next user. The peacock stands proudly, its tail still fanned, a silent, beautiful guardian of cleanliness. The entire process is a graceful, silent ballet of mechanical servants, a perfectly timed ritual of service. And the engine driving it is, once again, a clever application of water and gravity. Inside the pedestal is a hidden water tank. When you pull the lever, it doesn't turn on a tap directly. Instead, it starts a drip of water into a small tipping bucket. When this first bucket fills and tips over, its motion does two things. It pulls a string to release the first servant with the soap, and it opens a valve to make the peacock pour the first stream of water. The water from that first pour doesn't just go down the drain. It is cleverly channeled into a second, larger tipping bucket. When this bucket fills and tips, it initiates the next phase of the program. It pulls a lever that retracts the first servant and releases the second servant with the towel, while also triggering the second, longer pour from the peacock. It's a sequential program, a physical flowchart where one event automatically triggers the next. It's an analog computer for washing your hands. The soap itself was likely not the hard solid bar we use today. It would have more likely been a powder or a paste made from the roots of a plant like soapwort, which contains natural saponins that lather beautifully in water. This would be mixed with fragrant oils and ground herbs. A far more luxurious experience than a cheap bar of soap from the supermarket. Historians and sociologists still debate whether these complex hygiene automata were primarily functional devices to encourage cleanliness and impress guests, or if they were also imbued with a deeper symbolic meaning about ritual purity, and the ruler's ability to provide for his court is spiritual as well as physical well-being. Standing here, having just been attended to by this silent, flawless servant, the experience feels both practical and profoundly ceremonial. It demonstrates the incredible range of Al-Jazari's vision. He could construct a colossal, roaring spectacle like the elephant clock to dominate a public space, but he could also design a quiet, personal, and deeply elegant machine to serve a single person. His genius wasn't just in mimicking living things. He could also create vast abstract displays of pure information, machines that told not just the time, but the story of the cosmos itself. You've seen Al-Jazari's genius manifest as a multicultural behemoth and as an intimate personal servant. Now you're going to witness it in yet another form, as a monumental information dashboard. You are brought before a great wall in the palace, a wall now dominated by one of his largest and perhaps most complex creations. This is the castle clock. It stands over 11 feet high and is nearly as wide, a magnificent facade of a castle rendered in wood, brass, and ivory. It has no central character, no elephant or peacock to grab your attention. Its protagonist is information itself, a story of the heavens told through the language of mechanics. At the very top of the structure, a large, ornate circle displaying the 12 signs of the zodiac rotates slowly, almost imperceptibly, throughout the year. Below this, a golden disc representing the sun glides across a track from left to right, charting its journey through the sky. As it sets on the right-hand side, it disappears, and a silver crescent representing the moon appears on the left, beginning its own nocturnal journey. The moon automaton was particularly ingenious, as it was designed to physically rotate throughout the month, showing a sliver for the new moon and a full bright face when the real moon was full. It was a real-time display of the lunar phases. The main time-telling feature is a row of 12 elegant doors in the upper part of the facade. At the dawn of each day, all the doors are closed. Then, at the end of the first hour, the first door swings open to reveal a small, stoic figure inside. At the end of the second hour, the second door opens, and so on. a silent progression that marks the passing of the day. And this being a creation of Al-Jazari, it is not a silent affair. On the hour, a clamor of activity erupts. A gallery of mechanical musicians, flutists, drummers, and trumpeters springs to life, playing a short, regal fanfare. At the same moment, two bronze falcons perched on top of vases lean forward and drop balls from their beaks. The balls fall into the vases below, striking bells that chime the hour with a clear, resonant tone. It is a stunning amount of information to be presented by a single machine in an age without electricity or computers. It tells you the time of day, the phase of the moon, and the position of the sun in the zodiac. It is a clock, a calendar, and an astronomical chart all in one. And underneath this beautiful, data-rich display lies an engine of breathtaking complexity. The entire system is powered by the familiar combination of a large water wheel and a precise tipping bucket escapement, ensuring a regular, controlled release of energy. This regulated motion drives a massive central gear, a huge wooden disc that rotates once every 24 hours. This is the master controller. As this great wheel turns, it pulls on the chains that move the sun and moon models. A series of pegs along its circumference trips the levers that open the 12 doors, one by one, at the correct hourly interval. The astronomical calculations required for this would have been immense. Getting the gear ratios just right to accurately model the movements of the sun, the moon, and the zodiac is a problem of advanced mathematics and astronomy. Astronomical historians still debate whether the complex gear ratios required for the solar and lunar models were calculated by Al-Jazari himself, using advanced trigonometry, or if he inherited these calculations from the rich tradition of Islamic astronomy and astrolabe construction. Whatever the source of the calculations, implementing them in a physical machine of wood and brass is an engineering feat of the highest order. This clock wasn't a set-it-and-forget-it device. Every morning at sunrise, a dedicated operator would have to perform a reset, manually realigning the sun, moon, and zodiac pointers to match their actual positions in the sky. This daily calibration ensured the clock remained a true and accurate reflection of the heavens. You stand before it, watching the slow, majestic crawl of the golden sun across the castle facade. This machine is more than a clock, it's a philosophical statement. It's an attempt to capture the vast, orderly, predictable cycles of the cosmos and display them on a human scale. It brings the heavens down to earth, domesticating the sun and moon and making them part of the daily life of the palace. It's a bridge between the human and the divine, built not of faith, but of gears. From this cosmic scale, let's now zoom in to the most personal scale of all, a simple machine designed to perform a single, humble human task. From the cosmic grandeur of the castle clock, which maps the heavens, your focus is now drawn down to a far more terrestrial and intimate scale. You are in a smaller chamber now, a place for quiet conversation and refreshment. The Artukid ruler is seated with an honored guest. There is a lull in the conversation, a moment where hospitality is required. A human servant could, of course, step forward with a pitcher of sherbet, but where is the ingenuity in that? Instead, a wheeled platform is silently guided into the room. On it stands a life-sized automaton of a serving girl, dressed in the rich fabrics of the court. In one of her outstretched hands, she holds a small ornate cup. In her other hand, held closer to her body, is a beautiful glass jug filled with a deep red liquid. She is perfectly still, a silent and patient attendant. The ruler leans forward and gently takes the cup from her hand. The removal of the cup is the trigger. As if coming to life, the automaton's other arm, the one holding the jug, pivots smoothly at the elbow. The jug tilts and a precise measured amount of the red liquid pours not into the cup, but into the lid of the jug, which is shaped like a small, elegant bowl. The arm then extends fully, offering the drink to the ruler. He takes the bowl lid, drinks from it, and then places the empty vessel back into its position on top of the jug. As soon as the empty bowl is returned, the automaton's arm retracts to its original position. The cycle is complete. She waits, silent and still once more, ready to serve the next guest. This is not a performance of grand sequential actions like the clocks or fountains. This is an automaton designed for a single humble purpose: to serve a drink. Its genius lies in its subtlety and its interactivity. Its mechanism is a masterclass in elegant simplicity. The removal of the cup releases a lever. This opens a valve, allowing water from a hidden tank in the automaton's torso to power the arm's movement. At the same time, it opens a valve in the jug itself. Inside the jug, connected to this valve, is a float. As the liquid pours out, the float drops. When it has dropped by a specific amount, equal to 1 serving, the float's arm trips the valve, shutting off the flow. This is how the perfect measure is guaranteed every time. It's a beautifully simple feedback mechanism. You can imagine the slightly comical procedure of refilling the automaton, with a real servant literally pouring wine into a funnel in the robot's back. What is most fascinating here is that this machine is not fully autonomous. It is a collaborative robot, a cobot from the 13th century. It requires a human partner to complete its task. It waits for you to take the cup. It waits for you to return the empty bowl. Its design creates a graceful, silent protocol, a dance between person and machine. It trains its user to interact with it in a specific, courtly manner. You cannot rush it, you must follow the steps. This raises a fascinating question in the history of design. Roboticists and historians still debate whether the interactive nature of these automata was a deliberate design choice to create a more engaging and personal experience, or simply a mechanical necessity due to the difficulty of creating fully autonomous sensors and triggers with the technology available. Was this a feature? Or was it a bug that Al-Jazari cleverly disguised as a feature? Watching the silent, efficient grace of this mechanical servant, you realize you're witnessing the birth of human-machine interaction. Al-Jazari isn't just thinking about how the machine works, he's thinking about how a person experiences the machine. He is crafting a user interface out of levers and floats, designing a user experience based on the social rituals of his time. The clocks and fountains were spectacles to be watched from a distance. This automaton is a partner to be engaged with up close. It's a profound shift in the relationship between creator and creation. And while these incredible devices, the clocks, the fountains, the servants, are what made him a legend in the court, they represent only half of his story. His brilliant mind wasn't just dedicated to the luxuries of the palace. It was also focused on solving the fundamental, practical problems of the city and its people. You step away from the quiet-mannered world of the court. The cool, shaded marble of the palace gives way to the sun-baked earth and dusty roads of the world outside the gates. The air is no longer filled with the scent of incense and rosewater, but with the smell of livestock, wood smoke, and the fertile mud of the riverbank. Here, under the brilliant hot sun of Upper Mesopotamia, the engineering challenges are not of entertainment or philosophy, but of survival. The lifeblood of this city, and every city, is water. The mighty Tigris River flows nearby, but its waters run deep in the riverbed far below the thirsty fields and the bustling city. The single most important technological problem of the day is how to lift that water, tons of it, every single day. This is the world of the 5th chapter of Al-Jazari's book. There are no peacocks or musicians here. This section is all business. It is a masterclass in practical, powerful workhorse engineering, dedicated entirely to the design of 5 sophisticated water-raising machines. Al-Jazari didn't invent the concept of lifting water. Simple machines like the shaduf, a long pole with a bucket and a counterweight, were as old as the pyramids. The chain of pots known as a sakia had been used for centuries. His contribution was not invention from scratch, but radical, transformative improvement. He took existing ideas and, by applying his unparalleled knowledge of mechanics, made them exponentially more powerful and efficient. He was the great optimizer, the man who could squeeze every last drop of performance out of a machine. You stand now beside one of these creations on the bank of the river. A large, patient ox is tethered to a long wooden beam, plodding in an endless circle. You hear the rhythmic crunch of its hooves on the dirt path. The beam is connected to a massive vertical wooden gear, which turns slowly and with immense torque. Its thick, stubby teeth mesh with a second horizontal gear. This simple 90-degree power transfer is ancient, but Al-Jazari's detailed instructions on shaping the gear teeth to minimize friction and wear are not. This is where the efficiency begins. The horizontal gear turns a great axle, and this axle drives the heart of the machine, an enormous continuous loop of chain. Attached to this chain are dozens of wooden or clay buckets. You watch as the chain dips down into the muddy brown water of the Tigris. The empty buckets submerge, fill with a gurgling gulp, and then begin their long, slow ascent. They rise, dripping and heavy, up to the top of the machine, some 30 feet in the air. As each bucket passes over the top of the axle, it tips, pouring its contents into a stone-lined trough. From there, the water flows away, guided by gravity, into a network of irrigation channels that feed the green, vibrant fields of a royal farm, or perhaps into an aqueduct that carries it into the city for a public fountain or a bathhouse. The empty buckets descend on the other side of the loop to begin the process again. It's a constant, rhythmic, life-giving cycle. Creak, splash, lift, pour. Economic historians still debate whether the widespread implementation of these more efficient water-raising machines led to a measurable agricultural surplus and population growth in the Artukid region, or if they were primarily large-scale prestige projects for the royal estates and gardens. Were these machines feeding the people, or were they just watering the king's prize-winning melons? What is certain is that many of the new water-lifting devices that appeared in the notebooks of Renaissance engineers like Francesco di Giorgio Martini 3 centuries later look so similar to Al-Jazari's designs that the connection seems undeniable. His ideas, documented in his book, traveled. You listen to the groan of the wooden axle and the steady splash of the water. This is the other sound of Al-Jazari's genius. It's not the delicate chime of a clock or the whimsical tune of an automaton. It is the sound of a city's heart, pumping the water it needs to survive. This is technology not in the service of wonder, but in the service of life itself. And among these powerful practical machines, there was one that was utterly revolutionary. A machine that used a component unseen before in history and destined to change the world. A machine with a mechanical heart of its own. You move your attention from the great creaking sakia with its endless chain of buckets to a different machine nearby. It seems more compact, perhaps less imposing at first glance. It is powered by a similar plodding ox, turning the same initial set of gears. But there is no towering chain of buckets here. There is no rhythmic splash of dozens of pots emptying into a trough. Instead, from a single large copper pipe elevated high above the riverbank, a powerful, continuous, and unwavering stream of water gushes forth, arcing through the sunlight before splashing into the main irrigation channel. The delivery is smoother, quieter, and seems far more powerful. To understand why, you must look inside the machine, for this is the jewel of Al-Jazari's practical engineering. The twin-cylinder suction pump. Inside the wooden housing, you see the familiar mechanism that converts the animal's circular path into the rotation of a horizontal shaft. But this is the crankshaft. You see it clearly now. The wooden shaft with its 2 opposing U-shaped throws. Each throw is connected by a long, straight rod to a piston that moves back and forth inside a long, perfectly formed copper cylinder. The 2 pistons slide in parallel, a mechanical tandem. This is the engine of the pump. But the true genius, the secret to its operation, lies in something smaller: the valves. At the bottom of each cylinder, a pipe leads down into the river, and at the opening is a simple one-way flap valve, like a tiny trapdoor. It can swing open to let water in, but it cannot swing the other way to let water out. Near the top of each cylinder, another pipe leads to the main delivery channel. This pipe also has a flap valve, but this one can only swing out, not in. Now watch one full cycle. The crankshaft rotates, pulling the first piston backward in its cylinder. This creates a partial vacuum. The pressure inside the cylinder is now lower than the atmospheric pressure outside, so the water from the river pushes the suction valve open and rushes in to fill the empty space. Meanwhile, at the exact same time, the crankshaft is pushing the second piston forward. This compresses the water already trapped in the second cylinder. The suction valve at the bottom is forced shut by the pressure. The only place for the water to go is out, so it pushes the delivery valve open and shoots up the pipe with great force. The crankshaft completes a half turn, and the motion reverses. The first piston now begins its forward power stroke, forcing its newly acquired water up the delivery pipe. while the second piston pulls back, sucking a fresh supply in from the river. Because the two pistons are working in this perfectly opposed, double-acting rhythm, the result is a nearly uninterrupted flow of water. One cylinder is always pushing, while the other is sucking. It's a relentless, powerful, and incredibly efficient system. Hydraulic engineers still debate whether the primary innovation of this pump was the crankshaft itself, or the sophisticated use of self-acting, one-way flap valves, which were the real key to achieving efficient suction and delivery in a piston system. In truth, it was the brilliant combination of the two that made the machine a masterpiece. Al-Jazari's instructions even cover the small, practical details that make the difference between a machine that works in theory and one that works in reality. He specifies how to seal the pipes to the cylinders using lead rings and tallow to ensure the joints are airtight, a crucial step for the suction to work properly. This is not the work of a theoretician. This is the wisdom of a man with grease under his fingernails. Standing back, you watch the gushing stream of water, a testament to a machine that is hundreds of years ahead of its time. This pump is pure, unadorned function. There are no artistic flourishes, no automata to delight the eye. It is perhaps the clearest expression of Al-Jazari, the pure engineer. His skills, however, were not limited to the fine mechanics of automata or the fluid dynamics of pumps. He also thought on a monumental scale, applying his mind to problems of architecture, security, and grandeur. You turn your back on the river and its powerful, life-giving pumps and walk toward the city's heart, the great citadel of Amid. As you approach the main entrance to the palace complex, you are confronted by a final, monumental example of Al-Jazari's practical genius. You are standing before the palace gates, and these are not mere doors. They are a statement, a declaration of power and artistry rendered in timber and metal, standing as tall as two men and twice as wide. This is the first and last thing any visitor would see, and the message they send is unambiguous. The rulers within are protected by unbreachable strength and unparalleled sophistication. The sheer scale is the first thing that strikes you. The weight of each door must be measured in tons. To hang such a mass on conventional hinges would be impossible. They would tear themselves out of the stone walls under their own colossal weight. Al-Jazari's solution, detailed in his book, is both elegant and immensely strong. The gates don't hang. They pivot. Each door is built around a massive vertical post. The bottom of this post is a hardened, rounded nub of iron that sits in a polished stone or metal socket, embedded in the threshold. The top of the post is held firm by a massive iron collar set deep into the great stone lintel above the entrance. The entire crushing weight of the gate is directed straight down into the foundation, allowing it to swing with a smoothness that defies its size. The doors themselves are a testament to his understanding of materials. The core is thick, laminated timber, but the entire outward-facing surface is clad in a skin of heavy cast brass plates. This metal cladding serves a dual purpose. It makes the gates incredibly resistant to attack, whether by battering ram or by fire, and it provides a magnificent canvas for the artist. And what a canvas it is! The brass is covered in intricate geometric patterns, stars and polygons that interlock in a dizzying, beautiful display. Bands of Kufic script, the angular and stately calligraphy of the era, march across the surface, quoting verses from the Quran or singing the praises of the Artukid ruler. Great domed bosses punctuate the design, and in the center of each door is a heavy, ornate knocker. The famous doors of the great mosque in nearby Cizre, Al-Jazari's hometown, are believed to be a surviving example of this exact style of work. Their knockers are a fantastic piece of art, a pair of coiling dragons, their mouths agape, flanked by lions. It's a powerful, almost ferocious piece of iconography, a blend of Turkic and Chinese symbolism that speaks to the cosmopolitan and martial spirit of the age. Architectural historians still debate whether Al-Jazari's methods for casting large flat metal plates were an innovation he developed, or if he was documenting a highly specialized craft that was already well established among the metalworkers of Upper Mesopotamia, a region famous for its artisanship. Either way, his book is the only known source that explains the process in such clear, practical detail. You reach out and touch the cool, smooth surface of the brass. You can feel the crisp edges of the calligraphy under your fingertips. It is a masterpiece of integrated design. The engineering is inseparable from the art. The structural elements are part of the aesthetic, and the aesthetic elements contribute to the function. The gate is a single unified concept, a perfect fusion of strength and beauty. It is the ultimate expression of the dynasty's identity. But as impressive as the gate itself is, perhaps the most revolutionary thing about it is that Al-Jazari chose to write down how to build it. In an age of guild secrets, he laid the entire process bare, from the forging of the pivots to the casting of the decorative plates. And to make sure his instructions were absolutely clear, he accompanied them with what might be his most important contribution of all: his drawings. You pull back from the colossal palace gates, and the world of physical machines dissolves. You are now looking over the shoulder of a scribe, back in the quiet scriptorium, a single page of Al-Jazari's magnificent book spread out before you. For all the genius of his physical creations, it is these pages, these drawings, that form the enduring vessel of his knowledge. And they are every bit as revolutionary as the machines they depict. In a world centuries before the invention of printing, photography, or computer-aided design, the accurate transmission of complex technical knowledge was a monumental challenge. Al-Jazari's solution was to create a new language of engineering, a visual vocabulary of such clarity and elegance that it remains breathtaking today. Previous texts on mechanics from the Greek and Roman worlds were often frustratingly vague. Their illustrations, if they had them at all, were frequently little more than impressionistic sketches, lacking detail and a sense of proportion. They might give you the general idea of a machine, but they would never give you enough information to actually build it. Al-Jazari changes the game completely. His diagrams are not illustrations, they are blueprints. They are a direct communication from his mind to the hands of a future craftsman. Look at the page before you. The first thing you notice is the color. These are not simple ink drawings. They are vibrant, full-color paintings. A gear might be rendered in rich brown to represent wood, a pipe in shimmering gold for brass, the flowing water in a deep, cool blue. This isn't just for decoration. It's a form of color coding, a way to visually differentiate the components and materials, making the complex assemblies easier to understand. He also labels everything. Key parts of a machine are marked with letters from the Arabic alphabet, which he then refers to directly in his detailed textual descriptions. Take the pipe marked Aleph and connect it to the valve marked Ba. It's a simple, foundational technique of all modern technical drawing, and he is using it with masterful consistency in 1206. But his most advanced and frankly startling techniques are his use of cutaways and exploded views. To explain his twin-cylinder pump, he doesn't just draw the outside. He provides a cross-section, slicing the machine in half so you can see the pistons moving inside the cylinders and the crucial one-way valves in operation. To show how a complex gear train fits together, he will often draw the components separated from each other, as if they are floating in space, so you can see how each individual part is shaped before you assemble them. These are techniques that would feel perfectly at home in a 21st century IKEA instruction manual. And here they are, being used to explain a water clock to a medieval sultan. Art historians and engineers still debate whether Al-Jazari drew the initial technical sketches himself, which were then beautified by court artists, or if he worked in a more collaborative art director role, verbally describing the mechanisms to a team of highly skilled illustrators who created the final images. The rich narrative style of the paintings in the most famous manuscript is often attributed to the Mosul school of art, suggesting he was working with the absolute best talent available. The diagrams are populated with figures of craftsmen, rulers, and the automata themselves, giving a sense of scale and life to what could have been dry, sterile drawings. The ultimate purpose, stated in his own introduction, was clarity. He was frustrated by the ambiguity of earlier writers and wanted to leave no room for doubt. The diagrams are his solution. They are a universal language. Even if you struggled with his technical prose, you could understand the drawings. You could see how the parts connected, how the systems worked. They bridged the gap between imagination and reality, providing a clear, unambiguous roadmap for construction. These beautiful, intricate, and revolutionary diagrams are the key that unlocks his entire world. But their very beauty raises a question about the book's ultimate purpose. Were they created for the grimy hands of a workshop, or for the admiring eyes of a king? So you are left with this beautiful paradox. a book that feels equally at home in a dusty workshop or a king's treasury. What was its true purpose? Was it a practical, hands-on guide for the craftsman who would follow in Al-Jazari's footsteps? Or was it a magnificent presentation piece, a royal portfolio meant to be admired under the soft candlelight of the palace library, a testament to the glorious reign of his patron? The debate is a fascinating one because the evidence for both sides is overwhelming. Let's argue the case for the practical guide first. You need only read the text. Al-Jazari's prose is, for the most part, direct and unambiguous. He writes as a master teaching an apprentice. Take a quantity of mulberry wood and fashion a disc of this diameter. Cast the bronze in a closed mold box, ensuring the sand is damp. Drill the hole for the axle, but not all the way through. He specifies dimensions, materials, and procedures with a level of detail that would be utterly pointless if the book were just for show. He even includes troubleshooting, explaining why a previous design of his failed and how he improved it. This is the voice of experience, of trial and error, of a man who wants his reader to succeed in the real, physical world of wood shavings and molten metal. The inclusion of the purely functional water pumps and massive gates with the same level of detail as the whimsical Automata is the strongest evidence of all. Why bother explaining how to build a better irrigation pump if your only goal is to create a pretty picture book for the king? Now let's argue the other side, that this is a work of art, a royal treasure. This argument begins the moment you lay eyes on the object itself. The finest surviving copies are masterpieces of the bookmaker's art. They are penned on high-quality paper, a technology the Islamic world had perfected, far smoother and more durable than the animal skin parchment still common in Europe. The inks are rich and the paints are made from expensive ground minerals, the brilliant blue of lapis lazuli, the vibrant red of vermilion, even gold leaf. A common workshop manual would never be produced with such lavish and costly materials. It was clearly created to be a high-status object. Remember, this entire project was a royal commission. Its first and most important audience member was the king. The book's very existence was meant to glorify his reign, to serve as a permanent record of the wonders his patronage had brought into the world. It is a monument, just as much as a new mosque or a public hospital was. So which is it? The gritty shop manual or the gilded royal portfolio? The answer, and the true lesson of this manuscript, is that it is both. And that to Al-Jazari and his contemporaries, there was no contradiction between the two. The modern division we make between art and engineering, between beauty and utility, would have been utterly foreign to them. For them, a thing was not truly well made unless it was also beautiful. An idea was not truly brilliant unless it was expressed with elegance. The book is the perfect embodiment of this worldview. It is a beautiful object about the creation of beautiful objects. The medium perfectly mirrors the message. Curators and codicologists still debate whether the surviving lavish copies of the manuscript were the master versions intended for the royal library, while more modest, purely functional copies might have been created for actual workshop use, but have since been lost to time due to wear and tear. It is possible that such shop copies existed, used until they fell apart. But even if they did, the master copies that survive tell us everything we need to know about the holistic vision of their creator. This refusal to separate the practical from the sublime is one of the most profound aspects of Al-Jazari's legacy. But it all hinges on one crucial, radical decision: the decision to write it all down in the first place. That decision, the act of writing it all down, may have been the most radical thing Al-Jazari ever did. It's a choice that seems obvious to us now, in an age of open-source projects, online tutorials, and the free exchange of information. But in the 13th century, this was an act that flew in the face of centuries of tradition. The world of a master craftsman was a world of closely guarded secrets. Knowledge was a form of capital, the most valuable thing a person or a guild possessed. You didn't write it down. You certainly didn't publish it for your rivals to see. Knowledge was passed from a master to a trusted apprentice, slowly and carefully, through years of observation and hands-on work. It was a chain of personal inheritance. Blacksmiths had secret methods for tempering steel. Glassblowers had formulas for colored glass that they would take to their graves. Masons had geometric techniques for building arches that they shared only with members of their lodge. To document these secrets, to create a clear, replicable instruction manual, would have been seen as a profound betrayal of one's craft, and frankly, a terrible business decision. Why would you give away the very thing that makes you unique and valuable? Some medieval technical writers on subjects like alchemy would even go in the opposite direction, deliberately writing in convoluted allegorical language to hide their secrets from all but the most dedicated initiates. Against this backdrop of secrecy, Al-Jazari's book is a beacon of clarity and openness. At the behest of his king, he created what is, in essence, an open-source hardware manual. He lays it all bare. He is not trying to protect his intellectual property. He is trying to ensure its survival. He understood, or perhaps the king understood, that the machines themselves were ephemeral. They would break down, fall out of fashion, be dismantled for parts, or be destroyed in the endless conflicts of the region. The physical objects were mortal, but the knowledge, if captured and preserved correctly, could be immortal. This is the crucial difference between describing what a machine is and explaining how it is built. History is full of travelers' tales describing marvelous things they saw in distant lands, a talking statue, a self-playing organ. But these accounts are just legends because they lack the how. They inspire wonder, but they don't transmit knowledge. Al-Jazari's book is almost entirely dedicated to the how. He is giving away the secret to the magic trick. This is why his legacy is so tangible. This is why, in the 21st century, engineers and artists can build faithful, working reconstructions of his elephant clock or his peacock fountain. They are not guessing. They are following the instructions he left for them over 800 years ago. Historians of science still debate whether this act of documentation was part of a broader but sparsely recorded open knowledge movement within the great Islamic scientific centers, or if Al-Jazari's book was a singular anomalous event driven solely by the unique command of his specific Artukid patron. Was he part of a culture of sharing, or was he a glorious exception to the rule? Whatever the answer, the result is the same. He created a time capsule, a vessel filled not with artifacts, but with the skills, techniques, and brilliant ideas of his age. He was building a bridge of knowledge across the centuries. The question, then, is a tantalizing one. Who, if anyone, crossed that bridge? Did this incredible repository of mechanical genius simply sit in a library, admired but unused? Or did its ideas leak out, traveling along the trade routes and finding fertile ground in the mind of another, even more famous inventor? You're standing on that bridge of knowledge built by Al-Jazari's book. You look across the gulf of centuries, and in the distance, you see another figure, a bearded Italian in a floppy cap, furiously sketching in a notebook with his left hand. The time is the late 15th century, the place is Florence or Milan, and the man is Leonardo da Vinci. And as you look at the pages of his notebooks, a strange sense of déjà vu begins to creep in. Here, nearly 300 years after Al-Jazari, are sketches of gear systems, of pumps, of automata, and of flying machines. The popular myth of Leonardo is that of the lone genius, the man who invented the future from scratch in a series of lightning flashes of inspiration. The reality is that Leonardo was an obsessive, voracious student, a man who filled thousands of pages with notes and copies of ideas from every source he could find. And some of his ideas look uncannily familiar. You see in Leonardo's drawings designs for weight-driven automata, complex gear trains, and chain pumps that seem to operate on principles identical to those laid out by Al-Jazari. You see his fascination with converting rotary to reciprocating motion. You see his design for a mechanical knight, an automaton that could stand, sit, and move its arms, a spiritual successor to Al-Jazari's interactive servants. And you see his famous mechanical lion built to honor the King of France, which could walk forward and open its chest to reveal a bouquet of lilies. A theatrical marvel straight from the Al-Jazari playbook. The question of influence is one of the most hotly debated topics in the history of technology, and historians still argue whether the similarities in their work are proof of a direct transmission of knowledge or simply a case of great minds thinking alike when faced with similar engineering problems. Is it possible that Leonardo simply reinvented these mechanisms independently? Absolutely. But the similarities are numerous enough to make you search for a possible connection, a hidden path the knowledge could have taken. There is no smoking gun. Leonardo never mentions Al-Jazari by name. The book itself would not be formally translated into a European language for centuries. So how could the ideas have traveled? The path is not a single clear highway, but a series of faint, winding trails. Ideas could have been carried back to Europe by crusaders returning from the Levant, who may have seen such machines with their own eyes. They could have traveled with engineers and doctors in the court of the Holy Roman Emperor Frederick II in Sicily, a man fascinated by Islamic science. The most likely routes, however, were the great maritime trade hubs of Venice and Genoa. Their merchants had extensive and continuous contact with the Mamluk Sultanate in Egypt and Syria, where copies of Al-Jazari's manuscript were known to be prized possessions in the great libraries. It's entirely plausible that sketches, descriptions, or even whole copies of the manuscript made their way back to Italy, where they could have been studied by engineers like the brilliant Filippo Brunelleschi, or later, Leonardo himself. Knowledge of Arabic science was also flowing into Europe through Spain and through the translation of key texts on mathematics and optics. While Al-Jazari's book wasn't among them, the general principles of Islamic mechanics were part of the intellectual air that the early Renaissance thinkers were breathing. So you are left with a tantalizing mystery. There is no definitive proof, only a compelling collection of circumstantial evidence. But perhaps thinking of it as a way to diminish Leonardo's genius is the wrong approach. Knowing that he may have been standing on the shoulders of a 13th century Muslim engineer from Mesopotamia doesn't make him smaller. It makes him part of a richer, more complex, and more interesting global history of ideas. It reminds us that genius never, ever arises from a vacuum. It is part of a great conversation that spans centuries and cultures. The spirit of Al-Jazari, his synthesis of art and engineering, his boundless curiosity, seems to be rekindled in the workshops of Renaissance Italy. And yet, while Leonardo's fame would only grow, Al-Jazari's name, in the Western world at least, would slip into an obscurity so profound that he would be almost completely forgotten for half a millennium. So how does a giant of engineering become a ghost? How does the author of one of the most important technical manuscripts of the Middle Ages simply vanish from the story of progress as it was told in the West? The answer is not a single event, but a slow, creeping divergence of history, a story of empires rising and falling, of shifting languages and priorities. For centuries after Al-Jazari's death, his work was copied, studied, and admired within the Islamic world, particularly in Mamluk Egypt and later in the Ottoman Empire. But outside that world, his name and his book faded into obscurity. Part of the story is one of catastrophic disruption. The 13th century, when Al-Jazari was completing his life's work, was also the century of the devastating Mongol invasions. The sack of Baghdad in 1258 is often cited as a symbolic blow to the Islamic Golden Age. While innovation certainly didn't cease overnight, this period of immense upheaval changed the cultural and political landscape. The kind of stable, lavish, and intellectually curious patronage that Al-Jazari enjoyed under the Artukids became rarer. Meanwhile, as the momentum in one part of the world was slowing, in another, it was accelerating. The Europe of the early Renaissance was beginning its own steep, upward climb of technological development. The language barrier was also a critical factor. During the great translation movements of the 12th and 13th centuries, European scholars in places like Toledo and Sicily eagerly translated Arabic works on philosophy, medicine, astronomy, and mathematics into Latin. But practical, technical manuals on mechanics were largely overlooked. By the time of the High Renaissance, European engineers were writing their own treatises in their own languages and developing their own technological traditions. The invention of the weight-driven mechanical clock with its verge and foliot escapement, for example, sent European timekeeping down a completely different evolutionary path from Al-Jazari's water-powered world. His work, brilliant as it was, now belonged to a different technological tree. And so, for nearly 700 years, he was forgotten by the West. His name might appear as a footnote in an obscure German academic journal, his machines dismissed by the few who saw the manuscripts as trivial oriental amusements, mere toys for despots. The rediscovery, when it finally came, was thanks in large part to the tireless work of one man, Donald R. Hill, a British engineer and historian of technology. In the mid-20th century, Hill, who was fluent in Arabic, began a meticulous study of the surviving manuscripts. He wasn't just a historian, he was an engineer. He understood what he was looking at. He recognized the crankshaft, the camshaft, the sophisticated valves. He saw not toys but brilliant engineering. In 1974, he published the first complete, annotated English translation of the Book of Knowledge of Ingenious Mechanical Devices. For the English-speaking world, it was as if a lost chapter in the history of technology had been suddenly unearthed. 2 years later, at the 1976 Festival of the World of Islam in London, the rediscovery became tangible. A full-scale, working reconstruction of the elephant clock was built based on Al-Jazari's instructions, becoming the festival's stunning centerpiece. For the first time in centuries, a wide Western audience could see his genius in action. Historians of colonialism still debate whether the forgetting of figures like Al-Jazari was a passive result of historical events and language barriers or an active, if subconscious part of a Eurocentric narrative of history that preferred to trace a direct line of genius from the ancient Greeks to the European Renaissance, bypassing the contributions of the Islamic world. Whatever the cause, his re-emergence in the 20th century was a profound and necessary correction to the historical record. It was a piece of intellectual archaeology, dusting off a treasure that had been hidden in plain sight. Now that he has been found, now that the book is open once more, we can begin to see the echoes of his ancient ideas in our own ultra-modern world. Having been rediscovered, Al-Jazari's work now offers us a new and profound lens through which to view our own technological world. You are surrounded, every single day, by the direct descendants of his imagination. The technology has changed, of course. The gurgle of water has been replaced by the silent hum of electricity. The creak of wood has been replaced by the flawless precision of silicon chips. But the core principles, the fundamental ideas that brought his creations to life, are humming all around you. His world of automata was the blueprint for our world of automation. Think of the key concepts: a machine that can perform a sequence of actions without human intervention, the ability to change that sequence by altering a set of instructions, the conversion of a power source into a variety of precise movements, the use of simple feedback loops to create a self-regulating system. These are the pillars of Al-Jazari's work, and they are the pillars of modern robotics. The pattern of pegs on his musical boat's camshaft is, in essence, a computer program. It is a physical list of sequential commands. If the shaft is at 32 degrees, then activate lever for drummer A. If the shaft is at 35 degrees, then activate lever for flutist. It is a read-only memory carved from wood. The logic is identical to a modern computer program that executes lines of code one by one. The peacock fountain with its cascade of tipping buckets is a perfect analog of an automated assembly line. It is a machine designed to perform a series of distinct tasks in a precise order to complete a process. Al-Jazari was automating the process of hand washing. Today we automate the process of building a car. The principle is the same. His simple float valve, which detects the level of water in a tank and triggers an action, is a sensor. It performs the exact same function as a modern electronic liquid-level sensor in a chemical factory or a fuel tank. It is a mechanism that allows the machine to react to a change in its environment, the basis of all feedback control systems. The very word robot is a modern invention, coined in a 1920 play from a Czech word meaning forced labor. But the dream of an artificial servant, of a machine that can perform a human task, is ancient, and Al-Jazari gave that dream a tangible, mechanical form. Cyberneticists and philosophers of technology still debate whether these early automata represent a true ancestor of artificial intelligence, or if they are simply sophisticated clockwork mechanisms, lacking the crucial elements of learning and adaptation that define modern AI. It's a fair distinction. His machines could not learn or make independent decisions, but they were a monumental step toward the dream of intelligent machines, demonstrating that complex, lifelike behavior could emerge from purely mechanical means. Even his focus on the interaction between human and machine, seen in the drink-serving automaton that required a person's participation, echoes in our modern obsession with user experience and interface design. He was thinking about how the human and the machine would dance together, a question that now occupies the minds of thousands of designers creating our apps, our smart homes, and our websites. So the next time you see a robotic arm on a factory floor, or set your coffee maker to a timer, or even just watch a simple animated display, you can see the faint ghost of Al-Jazari's workshop. The lineage is not in the specific gears and levers, but in the fundamental thought process, the dream of encoding human ingenuity into a machine. And so, for our final moment, let us return to where that dream was forged. And so, your journey through time comes full circle. You leave the modern world with its silent humming electronics and travel back through the centuries of forgetting and rediscovery, back past the workshops of the Renaissance, back to the sun-drenched courtyards of the Artukid Palace. You find yourself standing once more at the threshold of Al-Jazari's workshop. It is late now. The palace is asleep. A full moon hangs in the sky, and its cool silver light streams through a high arched window, illuminating the quiet sanctuary of the master craftsman. He is here, an older man now, his beard streaked with gray. He is not at a workbench, not casting metal or carving wood. He is seated at a small desk, a single flickering candle pushing back the shadows. Before him are the final pages of his book. His life's work, commissioned by his king, is finally complete in this year of 1206. He will not live to see another. The tools of his trade lie scattered around the room, silent for the night. On a bench you see a half-finished automaton, its copper limbs gleaming softly in the candlelight. Leaning against a wall is a small, experimental camshaft, its wooden pegs waiting to tell a story of rhythm and music. In a water trough in the corner, a prototype tipping bucket sits, a silent promise of a perfectly measured pulse. This room is a microcosm of his entire world. It is a space where the line between the artist's studio and the engineer's laboratory simply does not exist. The same hand that drew the precise schematics for a piston also sketched the elegant curve of a peacock's neck. The same mind that calculated the gear ratios for an astronomical clock also imagined the delightful surprise of a mechanical servant offering a towel. Here, practicality and beauty are not in conflict. They are in a deep and profound conversation. But now, with the knowledge you carry, you see something else in this room. You see ghosts. You look at the crankshaft on his workbench and see the spectral image of a steam engine piston, of a future of industry and travel he could never imagine. You look at the camshaft and see the flickering ghost of a computer's memory, a set of instructions spelled out in silicon instead of wood. You look at the still lifeless automaton and see the ghost of the millions of robots that now populate our world. His workshop is haunted by the future he was unknowingly helping to create. He was a man who planted seeds in a garden, unaware that the trees would not fully bloom for another 700 years. We are left with the final unanswerable question that historians still debate. Did Al-Jazari have any inkling of his own staggering importance? Or did he see himself simply as a humble and loyal servant of his king, a master craftsman completing his final commission, unaware that he was writing a book that would echo for a millennium? No one even knows for certain where he was buried. His final resting place, like his innermost thoughts, remains a mystery. He looks down at the final, beautifully illustrated page of his book, a diagram of an intricate fountain, the water painted a brilliant, impossible blue. He dips his pen in the ink one last time, adds a final flourish to the text, and then he leans back, his work finally done. A quiet, satisfied smile touches his lips. The candle flickers. The water in the testing channel gurgles softly, and the ghosts of the future watch over him, silent and patient, waiting for the world to catch up. And now, as the image of that quiet workshop begins to soften and fade, you can let your own mind begin to settle. The long journey is over, the story is told, and all that remains is the gentle echo of ideas drifting through time. The same moonlight that fell through Al-Jazari's window is the same moon that is likely hanging somewhere in your own sky tonight, a silent and constant witness to the slow unfolding story of human ingenuity. Allow the intricate details of the gears and the levers to dissolve, leaving only a feeling of quiet wonder. Let the rhythmic drip of the water clocks and the gentle creak of the great water wheels become a soothing, distant hum, a lullaby from a world long past. There is no need to hold on to the facts and figures any longer. You can simply let them go, letting your mind float in the calm, quiet space that follows a long story. Let your breathing become slow and deep, and allow the soft darkness to welcome you. The hum of the past is fading, blending with the gentle hum of your own world, a perfect sound to carry you off into your own peaceful, wondrous dreams.